You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we are through the looking glass here because we've got a bombshell corruption scandal that just emerged onto the scene that involves a top Trump administration official accepting $50,000 in a bag of cash. Can you explain what happened here?
Yeah, only the best people. Donald Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, who you've probably seen in the news recently trying to justify the unjustifiable, like violating the due process rights of folks as part of this aggressive immigration crackdown. So we now know that apparently there was a criminal investigation of Tom Homan underway by both the U.S. Attorney's Office in Texas and Maine Justice, the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., the Public Integrity Section, before Trump was elected to the second term. And it involved FBI agents recording Tom Homan taking $50,000 in cash in a paper bag and promising that he would steer business to these FBI agents who are undercover and posing as businessmen. He would steer business to them if Trump got reelected. Brian, that is bribery -1. The only reason it is -1 is because as the investigation continued and as Donald Trump got elected and as Donald Trump took control of the Department of Justice, instead of doing the responsible law enforcement thing, which would have been, let's see if Tom Homan makes good on his corrupt, bribery-riddled promises and began steering business to these undercover FBI agents posing as businessmen, steering government contracts to them as part of a quid pro quo, a bribery scheme. Instead, Donald Trump's FBI and Department of Justice shut down the criminal investigation. Now, let's unravel whether a crime was committed, because, of course, Todd Blanche, Deputy Attorney General, recently issued a statement when this reporting broke saying, well, there was no credible evidence that a crime was committed. Now, Todd Blanche may be hanging his hat on, well, yeah, because we dismissed the investigation. We shut it down before Tom Homan could deliver the quo for his quid. Let me break it down. Quid pro quo. This for that. When you promise or you agree to use your government position to obtain a thing of personal value to you, like $50,000, and I'm going to steer government contracts your way, that's bribery. That's quid pro quo. That's this for that. But it looks like they couldn't get to that because even though Trump was elected and Tom Homan was put in a position where he could conceivably make good on his promise to deliver for the $50,000 in cash that he was given, they shut down the investigation. So it looks like they basically protected him before the crime could be complete, before it could come to fruition. Now, at the risk of turning this into a legal breakdown law school class, Brian, there is also a crime called attempted bribery. What does that mean? It means you took significant steps toward the commission of the crime of bribery, and but for some intervening factor beyond your control, you were unable to complete the crime of bribery. This sure smells a lot like attempted bribery. So that is where we stand right now. And Brian, the Trump administration knew all of this when they decided to make Tom Homan border czar. But you know what? Maybe some, criminal misconduct or potential criminal misconduct on your resume made you a more appealing candidate for a position in the Trump administration than a less appealing candidate.
Right, at this point, it's basically a prerequisite. Well, then all of this, by the way, as a quick aside, underscores the need for folks who are going to focus on justice and the law as it actually stands. So for those who are watching, if you'd like to follow along and support our content, please make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. The links are in the post description of this video. I got to ask, because the two jurisdictions that this occurred in, that it would be possible for them to take action against him were Texas and Maine Justice, basically the federal government. because those two jurisdictions are run by people who are political allies of this administration, does that mean there's no recourse? Does that mean that any crimes at the hands of these high-ranking Republican officials can take place and nothing can happen because Texas Republicans are in charge and they're ideologically aligned with this administration? And then as far as Maine justice is concerned, as far as the federal government is concerned, that's also led by Trump Republicans, and they're not going to do anything to hurt one of their own. And so, A, is there no recourse for the Tom Homan situation? And B, are any high-ranking Republican officials allowed to engage in overt criminality with basically a get-out-of-jail-free card at this point?
You know, it's a great question and an extraordinarily frustrating question, because as long as the Department of Justice and the various United States attorneys' offices around the country are in, not just Republican control, but Trump control, which he has made clear he's the one directing prosecutions or, directing DOJ to decline to prosecute people, there is relatively little recourse on the federal front. However, we always look for a point of light, faint though it may be. It doesn't say in the reporting, or at least I haven't seen it reported out, that the transfer of the big bag of cash, it was reportedly in a Cava bag, the fast food chain, the actual physical transfer took place in Texas. But I am inferring that because it was the Texas U.S. Attorney's Office that was running this investigation. That suggests that the potential criminal conduct occurred in Texas. So let's run with that for a minute. If it occurred in Texas, and if it violated Texas state law, what looks like this attempted bribery, even if it didn't come to fruition, then Texas state law enforcement authorities could, in theory, pick up the criminal investigative ball and run with it. But given that Texas is also largely in control of Republicans, it seems unlikely that that would happen. But that is one possible area where, this investigation could be pursued. Otherwise, Brian, I'm afraid things are very dark on the law enforcement front. When you have a president who the Supreme Court has given absolute presidential immunity, can violate our nation's laws, can commit crimes against the American people, not to mention murdering Venezuelans on the high seas without any legal basis to do it. When you realize that the president is above the law, is beyond the reach of the law, and anybody that the president employs in any of his criminal schemes or conduct, he can simply deliver them a pardon, and the Supreme Court has said that that is also virtually untouchable. We are living in the age of lawlessness as sanctioned by the Supreme Court, and the criminals who perpetrate that lawlessness are being protected by, among others, the Supreme Court and their rulings. It doesn't get any darker on the law enforcement front in, I would assert, the history of our country, but this is where we are.
Glenn, is all of this so subjective that all it takes is prosecutors just declining to prosecute even the most overt, blatant crime, like handing somebody a bribe with $50,000 in a bag? Like, is all of this just up to whether or not a prosecutor is buds with the person who committed the crime, and that's all it takes to bury overt criminality?
In a lawless United States of America, in a lawless Trump administration, yes. And I hate to say that, Brian, but as long as lawlessness rules, when we discuss questions like, well, isn't there some objective standard in evaluating evidence and deciding whether an investigation and possible prosecution should be pursued or not? When people are guided by their oath of office, which I took both as a military Army service member and as a Department of Justice prosecutor, I pledged my loyalty to the Constitution, and I pledged to support and defend and protect it from all enemies, foreign and domestic. I have rules of ethics as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, that require me to charge cases that have enough evidence to charge and decline to charge cases where the evidence is lacking. But in a lawless Department of Justice, in a lawless Trump administration, all bets are off. So, I have to answer your question in two ways. if the rule of law applies, there are objective standards when we, prosecutors, are assessing the quality and quantity of evidence to decide whether to present it to a grand jury for indictment and, in the event of indictment, take it to trial. But in a lawless Trump administration, there are no rules.
Glenn, I got to ask, do you think that we're ever going to be able to see the video that they purportedly have in their possession of Homan accepting this bag of cash?
Brian, I love this question because the answer is we might. So let me put some meat on the bones of this answer. Anytime we ask a question, will there be some transparency in the Trump administration and the Pam Bondi Department of Justice? The answer is almost always, are you kidding me? Of course not. However, the main reason that the Department of Justice has for refusing to release information and evidence is it's an ongoing investigation. Well, guess what? Because FOIA requests will now be filed by news organizations, I predict, saying you need to release the damn tape of Tom Homan accepting $50,000 in cash in a paper bag and promising to criminally steer government contracts to these businessmen who were actually undercover FBI agents. The main reason DOJ can resist releasing that when a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request comes in is pending investigation. Well, guess what, friends? Ain't no pending investigation because you corruptly shut it down. So, Brian, it may be that we should start the mantra, not only release the Epstein files, but release the Homan tape.
Glenn, can you talk about the statute of limitations for something like this? Let's say we're in a world where the Trump administration, despite its best efforts, is not in power forever, and Democrats take control, at least of the federal government, if not the state of Texas. But is there a world in which Tom Homan's crimes could at least be prosecuted when folks who actually care about law and order don't just use it as a bumper sticker to hide their overt criminality when they take control?
Yeah, the statute of limitations question is not as easy to unravel as it used to be. It used to be that if there was a 5-year statute of limitations, and all that is a fancy way of saying prosecutors have to charge somebody within 5 years of the date of the offense, and if not, it's timed out. Now, crimes like murder have no statute of limitations. That's the mother of all crimes. We can charge somebody 20, 30, 40 years later, and I've been involved in cases like that as a former homicide prosecutor. But most federal crimes, including bribery, I assume, I would have to go crack my big ugly blue book of federal laws, the United States Code, to double check. Most federal crimes carry a 5-year statute of limitations. So strictly speaking, if you're just looking at the calendar, this one may have timed out because at least the money exchange, the big bag of cash, presumably unmarked bills, because why shouldn't everything sound like a mob movie now, will have happened 5 years before a Democrat takes office in the event a Democrat wins the presidency, and it feels like it would time out. But there are a couple of things at play here that make that answer not definitive. One, when you're engaged in a crime where you've taken some steps to commit the crime, you've taken the cash, but you are waiting a period of time to deliver the quo, deliver the government contracts to the people who paid you $50,000 to do it, the statute of limitations doesn't run until the last act that completes the crime is committed. Now, we know he didn't get a chance to because he was waiting it out, and then the Trump administration, I would contend, corruptly shut the investigation down. So there's an argument that no, that the statute of limitations clock didn't start running until at least the time that the Trump administration corruptly, if it was a corrupt, tossing out of the investigation, shut it down. And let me go a step further. And the reason I can't give our viewers definitive answers is because this stuff hasn't been litigated much, because this has not been the way the executive branch of the United States government has operated. There's another argument to be made that a corrupt stopping of the Tom Homan investigation shouldn't give Tom Homan the benefit of the statute of limitations protection. It should continue to run. It should be stayed or paused. Here's one of those instances where a judicial stay or pause might be a good thing, and he can still be prosecuted when a new administration comes in, and that administration is determined to and dedicated to actually applying the law without fear or favor. So many moving pieces. We could write law review articles on these kinds of issues. But what I will say is there's no easy, intuitive, or definitive answer to any of this.
And again, to your exact point, in a situation where this country wasn't led by these lawless Republicans, we would actually have some movement on this issue. But I fear that other than the reporting, there's not going to be a lot of movement otherwise. With that said, we will continue to focus on all legal issues for those who are watching right now. If you'd like to follow along and support our work and support independent media, which has never been more important in light of the failings of legacy media, please make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. It's completely free, but a great way to support our work. I'm going to put the links right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.